And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ask the Theologian on this Wednesday. Started out with the old elevator music this morning because we had a connection issue, which put us off time. So I didn't want to take any more of your time. So here we are for your biblical, theological, and worldview questions, ready to go today. Let's start with a question that comes from Edith in Missouri, who says, let's see, I've finished up your wonderful study of Galatians. Well, how nice. Thank you. But in Galatians 5:5, the hope of righteousness for the Jews is not clarified. I'm wondering if it's referring to the second coming of the Messiah. Well, let's look up, let's see again, Galatians chapter 5, verse 5, see if we can add some insight into that. And here we go. Maybe. We had to reset everything, and so, you know, all the little connections are off. I think we're back on here. For we, through the Spirit, wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. Sorry that that's not coming up on the screen for you, but that's what it says. For we, through the Spirit, wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. Now, excellent question on this, Edith. Let's go back and see, first of all, what I said in my notes. And I said, again, pardon me that I can't get this on the screen, but it says, Paul again switches pronouns to we, speaking of Jewish believers. That is very consistent in Galatians, that we, the first person pronoun is going to be Jewish believers. We, he goes on to say, he does this to reiterate that the Jews are not justified by laws, you have in verse 4, as taught by the Judaizers, but their only hope of righteousness is by faith. Why do they wait for the hope when that hope is currently available? The word wait, and I give the Greek word, has some double prefixes, go on into all of that. Moving away from, out of the point of origin. Thus, the full word is moving away from where we started waiting. And I give some examples there. Now, it looks like you're exactly right, Miss Edith, that never along the way do I say what that hope of righteousness by faith is. So, what is that hope of righteousness? Could it be the Messiah? We, through the Spirit, wait for the hope of righteousness. You know, it could be that the hope of righteousness, as I think about this, I think I want to be careful that I don't do that fallacy of having something planted in my mind and then I run with it. But there is the issue then that takes place that says that the hope of righteousness, well, okay, I'm going to back up. So yes, it could be the second coming. We're waiting for the hope of righteousness. But I think the emphasis here is, and if I can get this up on the screen, I will show you. Nathan's working on that. But I think that the issue, there we go, the emphasis is by faith. Let me show you why I say that. And if we come over here to the Greek, I'm going to enlarge this a little bit and bring this up for we by the Spirit. Notice that in the Greek, by the Spirit, by faith, the hope of righteousness we await. Now, that's an odd arrangement of words, an odd order of words for English. But in Greek, you order words by their priority. So, I think the emphasis here is we waited for righteousness before by, let me check verse 4, yes. Previously, we waited by the law. Now we wait by faith or in the Spirit. I'll get back to verse 5 here in the center. We wait by the Spirit, by faith, for the hope of righteousness. So I think that hope of righteousness remains the same, which in a sense, really is the second coming of the Messiah, especially for the Jewish people. So you're not completely wrong on there, but I don't want you to miss the fact that the emphasis here becomes not by law, but by faith. And, of course, for the Jewish people, again, he is also telling them that the gospel of grace is available for them. Don't go teaching of an individual righteousness that comes by law, because now the message of grace is being presented by grace through faith. Thank you for that question there. I appreciate that. And Nancy had a question yesterday, Pueblo West, Colorado. Stephen, is that, let's see, she was asking Stephen, the theologian in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Isn't that the reason Jesus wasn't recognized after his resurrection? Why the doubting that Thomas needed to put his finger in the nail-pierced hand? This goes back to the issues of the resurrection, and at the resurrection, is there a real body? And of course, Thomas says, I want to see a real body first. We call him Doubting Thomas for that, but I don't know, maybe Skeptic Thomas is a better way to go. And I'm all for skeptics. Let's go to a new question. Keith, in Pennsylvania, do the Jewish people have any tradition or specific person or persons who founded Jerusalem? I happen to have just read about this the other day. What was I studying that spoke about Jerusalem? Your father's a Hittite, your mother an Amorite. Where was that? In one of my studies that we were taking place, was that I believe that was Ezekiel, and in Ezekiel, let's see if I can pull that up here quickly. And yeah, Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 3. So it was a week ago we looked at this particular passage, which says, "Thus says the Lord thy God unto Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan." That is to say that when Jerusalem was founded, it was founded in the land of Canaan. It was not founded after was taken, the land was taken from the Canaanites, and it was the land of Israel anymore. So it, like many cities, like Jericho, for example, was a Canaanite city. And many of the other cities, no doubt, that you could take, because the book of Joshua lists all these cities that Joshua conquered. Jerusalem, existing at that time, so it was of the nativity. The nativity was of the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite, thy mother was a Hittite. Now, what I said in that particular study a week ago was that we don't really know about the birth of Jerusalem. And as far as I know, the Jewish people also don't have any tradition, any specific person of who founded Jerusalem. I think that the Jewish people would agree with Ezekiel on this, that Jerusalem goes back into time prior to the conquest. I think certainly they would bring Melchizedek, the king of Salem, into that, but I've never heard that they believe that Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, was the founder of Jerusalem. I've never heard that anyway. Let's see if we can check one site here. We may not find any help, but let's go to Chabad.org and let's just say who founded Jerusalem and see if we get anything in there. Who named Jerusalem? When wheelchairs fly in Jerusalem, sounds like a Something about the resurrection. Let's see. Historic. Okay. Looks like that first one might be of interest to us. So let's check it out just a little bit. As the name Jerusalem rolls off my tongue, my mind conjures images of stone-cobbled streets upon which ancient prophets and kings once trod, and more history than 1,000 books could ever hold. They're pretty accurate there. I was wondering what the name actually means and who made it up. The word Jerusalem, Yerushalayim in Hebrew, is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses, appears in the book of Joshua, at least it's not mentioned in full in the Pentateuch, but both halves are there. Yerushalayim, more specifically the Temple Mount, was the very spot where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac. That is Jewish tradition, but has some degree of credence there. We won't go into it. Let's just take it at face value there. Look in the narrative there, and you'll see that after he was told by an angel of God not to sacrifice his beloved son, it reads, and so Abraham named the place God will see, as it is said this day, on the mountain God will be seen. The Hebrew word will see is yareh. The first half you see right here, Yaru, become Yaru Shalom. So God will see. Now, what was the city called before? Abraham renamed it Yareh. To discover this, we need to backtrack a few chapters. After rescuing his relative Lot from captivity, we read how Abraham was greeted by Melchizedek, king of Shalem, who greeted him with bread and wine. An ancient tradition tells us that Melchizedek was actually one and the same as Shem, son of Noah, and that Shalem was none other than the very place that Abraham would eventually rename Yareh. So Shalem is the second half, Yareh Shalem, Yerushalayim. How did Shalem and Yareh get together to become Yerushalayim? The Midrash is a historical rabbinical teaching, traditional rabbinical teaching that's been put down on paper. The Midrash shares a beautiful glimpse into the process. Said the Holy One, blessed be he, if I call the place Yareh like Abraham did, the righteous Shem will complain. However, if I refer to it as Shalem, the righteous Abraham will complain. Rather, I will call it Yerushalayim, and the name will contain the way that it was called by both of them, Yareh Shalem. Obviously, that's Jewish tradition of putting Abraham's name together with Shalem, which they say is Shem's name. On a deeper level, Yareh Shalem has an alternate meaning, complete awe. You see, on a soul level, Jerusalem is not just a passive hill on a dot on the map. It's that special place within each and every one of us where we have now gone into mysticism and make stuff up. That special place within each and every one of us where we are one with God, deeply in tune with His presence. Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem, therefore means complete awe, a state where one is in touch with God as to be in constant rapture. I would skip that entire last paragraph from Rabbi Schnauer, that guy, and chalk that up to the desire to give some application. But it's an interesting little article anyway of the ancient name and the Jewish nature of that. Now, Yerushalayim then, like all those cities of which Abraham was a part of, became a Canaanite city and remained a Canaanite city because Joshua didn't conquer it until, of course, David came. So that's as close as I'm going to be able to get you on the tradition of a specific person who founded Jerusalem. Clearly, even when Abraham named it Yareh, according to what is that scripture there? Abraham named the place God will see. That God will see right there. That is the Yareh. And let's see, footnote 2, that is Genesis 22:14. Let's pull that up and see how that appears in the, okay. So the reason you don't recognize Yahweh is we pronounced it different in English. Here we go. Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, is how we pronounce it in English. Now, remember that in English we use a sound even. That J is not a Hebrew sound. So it is let me bring it up in the Hebrew here. Right here, you notice there it's pronounced Yahweh. It's really the yah sound. And sometimes it's come over into English as the j sound. But the truth is we don't really know how to pronounce it. In Hebrew, it's Yahweh. In English, it becomes, Jehovah, all the same. How do you pronounce it? There's the Hebrew word. They really don't even know how to pronounce it, but they would go with Yahweh. And right here then, that is the Yireh. And you notice that this little letter right there, that little, it looks like an apostrophe, matches the apostrophe here. The Jews, of course, read from right to left, opposite of what we read from left to right. So Yahweh, He will provide. Yahweh, I'll get it right here. Yireh. Now that then is where we have come right here, Yireh. That we have this Yireh. We would say Jireh. And Jireh, there we get Jerusalem. In English, again, the Hebrew people would say Yerushalayim. We would say Jerusalem. So the English has almost always carried the J sound instead of the, shall we say, Y sound. And so Jireh is right in there. Now, I think that that part of the article is probably pretty good, that Jehovah certainly did, or Abraham certainly did, call the name of that place Yahweh Jireh, Jehovah Jireh. If you take Jireh, God will provide, but just go with this, He will provide, Jireh, and later put it with Shalem, the king of Salem, Jireh, Shalem, you get it. I think that's a pretty good understanding of it right there. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that is helpful. And let me see here if I can make something. I'm going to ask if Nathan can get me that URL there that Keith has sent, and I'll pull that up, bring it to this computer right over here. But we'll come back to that. Let's go to Young Christian Hope and Encouragement, and it is good to see you. Where you been? I haven't seen you in a while. Glad that you are back here with us, and let's take the question. What do you think about a career in law? It is something I've been considering, but the idea of getting guilty people off easy seems it may be in conflict with my faith. Just wanted another opinion. I'm so glad you asked the question. Let me give a number of answers here that may conflict you even more. The answer that I would like to give you is, first of all, I want you to consider. Now, this is true for me across the board, typically for young men, but especially because I've seen the questions that you have asked in the past. And they are very good, insightful questions, which tells me I know nothing else about you, but it tells me that you, Young Christian Hope and Encouragement, have a brain. It is so hard to find a brain in this modern world. And somebody with a brain ought to consider becoming a preacher. And I think that the study of law is a pretty good preparation for preaching. So I don't want you to give up the idea. I don't know if you ever had the idea, but I want you to entertain the idea that the goal of young Christian hope and encouragement is to be a preacher, because in this way he can most help people with the word, and that's really what they need help with. Now, how are you going to prepare yourself to be a preacher? I think that, and again, I don't know your age or any of this, so I think that it may be that I'm going to assume you are of the age in which a person goes to college and prepares for a career. Maybe wrong on that. Maybe you're below that age a little bit. You're anticipating. Good for you. Maybe you're above that age a little bit. Maybe you're 25 or 26 or 27, and you're thinking, hey, I need to do something now that'll prepare me for a better future. Good for you. Either way, wherever you are in that, I'm just assuming you're not, 55 years old. Though I still consider myself young, and hopefully have some hope and encouragement. But in preparing to be a preacher of the word, there are probably 2 or 3 areas of study which could be very helpful. The area of language, the English language, even more broadly, if there's any kind of degree that has language, Greek, Hebrew, kind of a linguistics type of degree, excellent. The classics, learning, and in the classics, you'd have to learn Latin and Greek. And if you had a degree in the classics, you're not going to get employed anywhere else, so you better plan on going in to be a preacher. But in the classics, to study classic literature, classic history. History is another one that would be good. But I think law is a very good, because you learn to read precisely in law. So all that's good. Now, and if, let's just assume you say, okay, I want to do law. I want to do law because it prepares me to read the Bible. It prepares me to teach the Bible. It prepares me to convince people in the Bible. If you listen to my preaching, you know that very often I'll say something like, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have presented to you the case, and Exhibit A, and Exhibit B, and Exhibit C. And I look at many theological arguments as in laying out a case and trying to convince the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Law, I think, is helpful to that. Now, let me say something general about law, and then let's get into specifically about what you have said. By the way, at one point I intended to go into law. I never made it, but that was my intent when I went off to college, was to get a pre-law degree and then go to law school. Now, I think that in law school itself, you're going to have to endure 3 years after your bachelor level. You're going to have to endure 3 years of 90% absolutely dumb classes. Constitutional law could be a very good class. The problem is you're not going to read the Constitution. You're going to read, people's opinion. You're going to have to read Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Barack Obama, and inundated with the kind of political agenda that law schools have adopted today. So if you go to a known law school, one of the state schools or something, and you find one of those, even on the conservative side, let's say, Texas Tech or something like that, in Lubbock, Texas, a conservative law school, you go into that, you're gonna get all sorts of propaganda in there. So be ready to filter that stuff out and not let the law degree affect you politically. Have your convictions about the law in advance, and read Black's Law, read ancient I say ancient, go back 200, 300, 400 years and read the basis of the law at that point before they just went totally haywire. Then the second thing is you're going to spend a lot of time in contract law and business law and these kind of things, that insurance law and all that kind of stuff, which a lot of lawyers, I would say probably the majority of the lawyers, that's where they make their money. It's in contracts, it's in insurance, it's in real estate, it's in all that kind of stuff. That, I think, is going to become more and more corporate, more and more machine-driven, more and more artificial intelligence. Is that the right word? That kind of goes back, a machine goes back through the law and comes back and spits out this opinion, and the computer becomes the lawyer for you. You got a brain. You let mindless lawyers go out and do that, and carry out all that stuff. My apologies to the lawyers in the congregation. Now, a sliver of lawyers go into criminal law, and that's what you have given an indication here. Those lawyers don't make as much money. Those lawyers have to deal with real dirty, ugly, stinky kind of issues. Those lawyers are put, if you're a defense attorney especially, rather than a prosecutor, those lawyers are put in the position of having to take some scoundrel and defend him. And you doing that might get that scoundrel set free. He might even be guilty, and you know he's guilty, and you got him set free. How do you feel about that? I think that, strangely enough, there is a benefit to that. And here's the benefit. The benefit is that you and I, as believers in the Word of God, we read the Bible literally, and we take its teaching literally. We carry that over, and we expect a rule of law. So we expect that a prosecutor from the state, a defense attorney, really says, I don't trust the state. And so the defense attorney comes and says, the state has not done their work. The state cannot prove this beyond a shadow of a doubt. And even if I get this scoundrel off, what I'm doing is holding down the power of the state. I am working against statism, if you will. I am working against an oppressive regime. And the defense attorney basically says, I don't trust the prosecutors for the state. They're coming to say my client is guilty. Maybe my client is guilty. But the state has obligations to assume that my client is innocent. And the state must prove it otherwise, and I'm going to make them do their work. Now, the benefit of that, if you have a bunch of good defense attorneys, then the benefit of that is that when you as a preacher or I as a preacher get taken by the state, then if we have developed a set of Christian, solid, constitutional thinkers, then there's an environment where somebody is going to be out there to defend us. So there is some benefit of that. Now, again, you have to be able to sleep with the fact that you worked against the state when ultimately the state might have been right. They just didn't do their job right. And therefore, you got the criminal off. But did you get the criminal off, or was the state just incompetent? and not carrying that out. That's what you have to deal with emotionally, mentally, spiritually, through all that. But if you can go at it saying, I want to develop a community which says innocent until proven guilty. That's true of Randy White, young Christian, Joe Hunt. Heard his story the other day. The Billionaire Boys Club. I was listening to a podcast on it. It's kind of an interesting story. Scum. But, somebody's got to defend him. So there's some benefit through all of that. Work through that in your mind and carry that out. But you go to law school, if you're good, they're going to want to hire you to be the corporate attorney, to do maybe even some more scumbag work, or to sort of be this, the guy that runs the machine that does the legal work now. If you spend your time there, just do it for the money so that you can be a good preacher on the weekends to some little church out there that needs you and couldn't afford you otherwise. There's lots of my opinion on all of that. Keith sent an article, a good short article on language. Language and Thought by Walter E. Williams. I am going to check that out. My assistant over here got it on the wrong computer, so I can't show it to you. But nonetheless, 17th century poet and intellect John Milton predicted when language in common use in any country becomes irregular and depraved, it is followed by their ruin and degradation. That's interesting that John Milton would tie proper use of language to healthy society. And when language becomes irregular and depraved, then it's followed by ruin and degradation. What he's saying is that language is the canary in the mine. Language is the thing that, announces we've got a problem. That's a very interesting proposition. I'm going to check that article out. For those of you who'd like to look at the article, it's called Language and Thought by Walter E. Williams at creators.com. Language and Thought by Walter E. Williams. It is it's a recent article, September 23rd of 2020. Thanks for sending that to me, Keith. I will check that out. Let me go to a follow-up here from Young Christian. There are more than enough innocent people who need representation. Why would you consider working on behalf of a criminal? I think that the innocent people who need representation are charged as being a criminal. So everybody who comes, again, if you're a defense criminal attorney, then everyone who comes to you has been charged by the state of something criminal. And there's probably some degree of evidence there, because otherwise the charge would not have come from the prosecutor. Therefore, yes, there are more than enough innocent people, but they're all going to come to you, and you're really not probably going to have the privilege of saying, let me investigate your case to see if you're innocent before I find out. Of course, they're all going to say they're innocent. Who was the one in the movie or something that was defending herself in prison, we're all innocent, and she says, I didn't kill my husband. He died accidentally. He ran into the butcher knife 39 times. Well, they're all going to claim innocence. You're not going to have the opportunity. So you're going to be deep into the case before you really can know, is this guy innocent or is he not innocent? So I think the defense attorney has to, this is Chuck's comment, not young Christians. Sorry about that. Chuck was commenting, do young Christian. I got this on there. I think that the attorney is going to be so deep in the case before he knows that at that point it's hard, maybe legally impossible even for him to get out. And for a young attorney starting, they start out, I can spot the young defense attorneys here in town. One, because they wear a suit and nobody else wears a suit. And the hamburger place I eat at is right across the street from the courthouse. So they come over there for lunch and they're wearing a suit, and it's always a bad suit. It never fits them very well because they're young and they don't know how to wear a suit and they don't have any money. And so they went to the secondhand shop and they bought some preacher's suit that turned it in. And I can spot him and say, okay, here's a defense attorney. He's defending this guy. Now, there's a lot of good reason to defend against the crooked prosecutors. So carrying that out, there's some good work that can be done there. Let's go to our friend Lisa in Baton Rouge, right? What does a good Christian look like for our dispensation, or is there even such a thing possible? I may be showing my evangelical upbringing. Well, we all show our evangelical upbringing, but it is really a great question, Lisa. What does a good Christian look like for our dispensation? So here we are. We live in the age of grace. We know, if you come from an evangelical background like Lisa and I do, and most of us on here, we know what a good evangelical Christian looks like. He has his Bible, she has his Bible, does the daily quiet time, goes to church Sunday morning. Used to be when Lisa and I grew up, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, maybe even did visitation on Tuesday night, and prayed before meals, even in restaurants, and paid for the policeman's meal if he saw him in there, and paid his taxes, helped old ladies across the street, and remembers the Alamo. All those things, a good Christian, votes Republican, all these things that we could add in. That's what a good Christian does. If you're a good Christian, a Baptist good Christian, then you also, you don't drink alcohol, you tithe 10% off the gross, and you make several contacts during the week, and you write that down on your envelope, all those kind of stuff. Now, much of that, I don't know that I've said anything there that's necessarily bad, but much of that is legalism that was carried over from other dispensations into our dispensation, and some of it just purely made up, like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. That's just more from our tradition than anything else. And there have been, again, in many evangelical circles, if you didn't today, it's pretty much, if you don't come to church, say twice a month, you're not a good Christian. And so what is a good Christian? We don't want to base our standard on our evangelical traditions or even our fundamental traditions, or certainly not on biblical teaching from other dispensations that doesn't apply to us, because that just breeds confusion, and God's not the author of confusion. So what does a good Christian look like? I think that this is just going to be the Randy White answer, so this one's free. I think that a good Christian today is one that can take their Bible and know how to divide it in such a way that they are not constantly confused and maybe even putting others into confusion on what applies to us and what does not apply to us. Then I think that when you take that which average Bible, of course, I've got an above average Bible right here, but in an average Bible, they might fill one column of If you took all of them together, the commands that Paul gives about the Christian life, maybe you'd fill one column of one page of all of Pauline writings. And, obviously, therefore, of all of the Bible. That means that a good Christian today doesn't have much to go on. A few, way to the edge kind of boundaries that he says live within these boundaries. And from there, a good Christian today has a great deal of leeway leeway of conscience. So a good Christian today says, I know where to find my instruction for Christian living. And I find it in Pauline writings. And I look and he gives me a few, very few basics. It might not even fill a whole column, by the way. And I take those few basics and I'm going to use that as some outer edges. And then for everything else, I am just going to decide myself. Just like as a man purposed in his heart, so should he give. I'm going to say, as a man purposed in his heart, so should he, so should he work, so should he marry, so should he live, so should he go to church. All of that is really left up to the individual now. So I want to look at it and say, God has given me a gift of eternal life, a gift that I could never earn or work for, and he doesn't even allow me to do that. So how can I best honor him with the gift? The gift is eternal, so I could go into sin and grace would abound. Should I? Heaven forbid. I don't want to do that. So I think a good Christian in this dispensation is one who honors God who has given him eternal life, finds ways to honor him in every way he can. So a good Christian would grow African violets, of course. A good Christian would smile. A good Christian would not give a bad witness. A good Christian would try to, get others into Bible study so that they can learn the great freedom that they have in Christ. When you have that freedom, you are free indeed. I don't think there's a lot of rigid structure to what a good Christian is today. Now, in our evangelical upbringing, of course, there is a lot of rigid structure to what a good Christian is today. If you want to live by that, probably they're not teaching bad stuff. If you live by that, you're going to live a pretty good life. But I think there's a better way to come to understanding all of that. And I think there's a lot of grace involved in it. Good to see you, Lisa. Years ago, how long has it been? Lisa and her husband invited me to their home in Baton Rouge to lead a Bible study on, I think it was a Friday night, a Saturday morning, and had a house full that was in there, and had a lot of fun. That was good to be there. I remember that day. Okay, let's see. We have Bev in St. Croix County, Wisconsin. What do you know about the color revolution? I don't know anything, but I just pulled this up on National Review. I forget, are they, I want to say they're conservative, but maybe I'm not correct here. It definitely, absolutely, probably won't happen here. The color, is this talking about red and blue? Let's just read a paragraph here and see. Listen, you're reading this on the internet, so I assume you can figure out how to reach my bosses and the human resource people, maybe even the people I love. We all know that we can figure out how to poison my dog, and so with that in mind, I want to assure you readers that officially I believe the polls. and they tell a simple story. Biden's our next president. I totally, officially don't think pollsters are capable of misleading others or themselves. Pollsters are really the most capable people we have in the country, the real heroes, almost as admirable as the rioters. Obviously, he does have some degree of facetious writing, which makes me like him already. But let's go on. Just so you know, I definitely totally understand that conspiracies aren't real. In fact, I don't think human beings are capable of conspiring. They can't even plan things most of the time. Nobody could have a backup plan because that would mean I'm a crazy person and no one needs a backup plan. And beating Donald Trump in November should be relatively easy for the Democrats. He's historically unpopular. He hasn't kept a variety of campaign promises, whether getting Mexico to pay for the wall or bringing the troops home. Go down on the biggest issue of the war, goes on to say how easy he is to beat here. So why do I constantly get this sense that for many progressives, squaring up and beating Trump in the election isn't enough? Instead, Trump must be toppled somehow, preferably in a major confrontation. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I sometimes get the unsettling sense that some progressives are steeling themselves, that is, strengthening themselves, for a color revolution in the United States. Now, from what I've read here, I am guessing, and if I'm wrong, someone maybe even try to correct me here, but I'm guessing that the color revolution is to totally make the U.S. A red country rather than a blue country. And of course, if we say, let's go to the 2016 election map by county. Let's just carry that out. And obviously, all of you have seen these maps before. And let me get to an image. There we go. We'll just take this one right here. Obviously, it's a red country on the county level. Unfortunately, except this county right here, which is mine. And there are certain blue counties. Now, this is 2016. Donald Trump did obviously win, but he didn't win the popular vote, which means, don't misunderstand this map, because the election of the president isn't necessarily, though it is a little bit, but it's not necessarily by amount of real estate covered. Rather, it does have to do with people and the overall vote of that state. So you take a Florida, for example, which is mostly red, but the challenge is going to be most of the people live right here in these two blue counties and these two blue counties and this blue county. And so Florida just barely went for Trump through all that. Now, again, my very quick guessing on all this, and hopefully I've got this right, is that the progressives want to make the United States blue. Not red, but blue. To do that, they do not need to change these red counties. Those can remain. All they need to do is change the weight of these blue counties. And how would they change the weight of the blue to overcome the red? Well, we've heard in recent days about stacking the court. The Constitution does not say how many people sit on the court, on the Supreme Court. So they can say, instead of 9, if they get the president and the Senate, that would be required. They'd have to have the president and the Senate. If they get that, they can say, instead of 9 justices, we want 21 justices. All of a sudden now, we've got 12 empty seats that we've got to fulfill. So the new president, the Democrat, will appoint or nominate 12 liberal leftist justices. The Senate will confirm them. And now, instead of all this 5-4 decisions, now we'll have those 12 plus, let's say they've got 3 on there, 13, 14, 15. It's a, 15-6 judgment every time. All of that is done by a pure power play. All of these counties can continue to vote as red as they want. But if the Democrats get the Senate and the presidency, they can do it. Now, the truth is the Republicans can do it too. But Republicans are gentlemen. Republicans believe in a rule of law. Republicans believe that a party should not make itself a dictator, and so Republicans aren't going to do it. Now, the other thing that could be done is that, again, if they get the presidency and if they get the Senate, they only need this for 2 years. Republicans had everything for 2 years, by the way, and because of rhinos like John McCain, who I have very little good things to say about him and the snake in the grass, Mitt Romney. But all of that, Republicans had the majority. They did nothing because they got, people like John McCain. You got Cindy McCain. I'll get back to the story here in a moment. But you got Cindy McCain, John's wife, widow, who's now going to, endorse Joe Biden. Now, what Cindy McCain really is saying is, I am going to endorse the guy who worked against every principle I hold in my body. But I'm willing to flush all that down the toilet because Donald Trump hurt my feelings. That is to say, she had no convictions. Her husband had convictions, but it was to the left side. I'm glad he lost, honestly. We would have been in worse trouble had Mitt Romney and John McCain won than we are today. And that's hard to imagine, but the red would have already just sold out to the left, and probably all this would have already happened. But anyway, back to our story. So they can stack the Supreme Court, make a red revolution, a color revolution. They can make D.C. a state. If they do that, D.C. gets 2 senators. What kind of people is Washington, D.C. going to elect? Democratic senators. They can make Puerto Rico a state. All of this, if I'm not mistaken, they can do it with a simple majority if they get rid of the filibuster, which they would. Filibuster is not a constitutional rule, it's a traditional rule. They can get rid of the filibuster, and so with a one-person majority, they can make Washington, D.C. a state. They can make Puerto Rico a state. All of a sudden, we have 52 states just with one more Democrat than Republicans, and a Democratic president who won't veto it. So then, now you've got 4 more Democratic senators. It will be decades before D.C. and Puerto Rico will vote a Republican senator, and therefore it will be decades before anybody but the Democrats have the majority. And the Democrats will rape the United States in public. They hate the American way of life. Joe Biden is anti-American. That makes Cindy McCain anti-American. She's saying, I will vote for the guy who would rape my nation in public. I'm for him. I think it's absolutely despicable. So I think that I think we've got very dangerous days ahead, because here's what happens. Obviously, again, the Republicans, they're going to be gentlemanly, and they might just be so gentlemanly they set their wife America out to be raped. That's not a gentleman, by the way. Some Republicans need to get a backbone. They need a spine. They need to They need to get mean and ugly on some of this kind of stuff. So, but let's just say the Republicans are gentlemen all the way through, and Mitt Romney has his way, and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, and they don't allow the constitutional provision of filling the seat to happen. They don't go by the rule of law. They don't go by the Constitution. They flush all that down the toilet. And then we have an election, and there's a 4-4 majority. A 4-4 contested election with the Supreme Court having a tie. What do you have then? You have a constitutional crisis, which probably ends in civil war. I don't know how else you would resolve it. So that's the end of our nation. Or John Roberts, another snake in the grass, he goes with the liberals, and you have a 5-3. And in that case, there's not a civil war, but it's just handed over to the communists. That's what they expected all along. We'll bring the United States down, never a shot will be fired. So we don't have a good scenario. I think the best case scenario is we get a Supreme Court justice in prior to Election Day that can contest some of that stuff. That even if Joe Biden, the communist America hater, gets elected and you get a Democratic Senate, even then, and they try to stack the court, they can do like what happened in FDR's day and at least say it's unconstitutional if we get somebody in there today. I think it's so strong in there. I'm like you, Chuck says, I feel guilty donating McCain and Romney back then. It was too easy for me to be fooled. I tend to want to trust. That being said, I spent most of my life trusting false preachers. Glad you're with us here, Chuck. You know, I don't think many of us had the foresight then. All we looked at is McCain versus Obama. Is that who he ran against? And we said McCain's better than Obama, and we went with that. But we didn't, carry that out very well. Okay, hopefully I pinned all that correctly on what the color revolution is. And carry that out. Shirley says, what does the Bible say about Christians getting a tattoo? Well, let me, I don't have a tattoo. The Bible really doesn't say anything about Christians getting a tattoo. There is a passage in Leviticus that talks about not marking your body for the dead. Let me see if I can find that actual passage. And that verse is taken, Leviticus 19:28, I think it is. That passage is taken by some to say you're not supposed to get a tattoo. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. Okay, so you could separate this from the dead part and just take it right there, nor print any marks upon you. Let's assume that does not mean print for the dead, but you're not supposed to print any marks upon you. Now, that obviously was for the Jewish nation. In fact, we could check. Let's assume that passage is for the entirety of the Jews, not just the Levites. And that it literally just means no marks on your flesh. Then in that case, all we could say is the Torah did not allow Jews to get a tattoo. That does not, even as we talked to earlier about Lisa's question about what makes a good Christian today in our dispensation, that doesn't really speak to whether or not a Christian in this dispensation should get a tattoo. Now, it could shed some light on it, because we could say the time God did talk about tattoos, he said, don't put any marks upon you. And I think we do live in this age of grace. I just, while we were talking here, I looked up in Chabad.org, again, the Jewish site, about tattoos. Why does Judaism forbid tattoos? Can a person with a tattoo be buried in a Jewish seminary? Honor a Holocaust victim by tattooing, they tattooed the number on there. I want a Star of David tattoo. Let's go to this one. The others are probably fairly plain. Let's go to this one just out of curiosity. I'm a 21-year-old Jewish man who's thinking of getting a tattoo. My two best friends have both gotten tattoos. I'm thinking of getting a Star of David. I have heard that tattoos violate Jewish law. What do you think? The fact that you would like a Star of David tells me that you're a proud Jew. The question is how proud King David would be about having his star pierced on your skin. To him, tattooing was something that decadent idolaters did, along with child sacrifice and body gnashing. You see, God couldn't get much more explicit in the Bible. It's right there along with other idolatrous acts. Leviticus 19:28, you shall not etch a tattoo on yourselves. I am the Lord. All those things that idolaters once did, even if they are not done with idolatrous intent, still have a spiritual impurity. I'll stop the reading of the article right there. But as you can see, the Jewish people, those who go by Torah, say you're not supposed to have tattoos. This article, and probably a lot of them do, go by that and say that's because idolaters had tattoos, and we, the Jewish people, are not idolaters. I don't even know if you have to go there. I think that if I was a rabbi, I would just say, thus saith the Lord. I don't know why he said it, but he said it. That settles it. No tattoos. Now again, that really doesn't speak to the believer today who is free. I think for the person, typically a young person who's considering a tattoo, because honestly, tattoos look better on young people than they do on old people. The thing is that most young people don't realize that someday they're probably going to be old people, and the tattoo's not going to look so good. But a young person considering getting a tattoo who is a Christian ought to stop and say, okay, why did God prohibit it in the law? I understand I am out from under the law, that there's a lot of things about the law that I disregard in my life, or should say I don't observe in my life. I don't have to observe this, but I at least want to know why, and do some investigation on that. Maybe, I think in the simplest sense, the young person would say, okay, I don't have to get a tattoo. I just kind of want a tattoo because they are kind of cool right now. Everybody wants a tattoo. So I don't have to get a tattoo. I realize that there was a time in which God said he didn't like tattoos, so I'm not going to get a tattoo. Now, the other thing I think that Christians should consider as it relates to this dispensation is Romans chapter 12, verse 1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Now, this little phrase right here that I tried to highlight and didn't do a very good job, there we go, present your bodies, that we stand before God someday with a resurrected body, and because Jesus took his pierced hands, I would presume then that we're going to take whatever piercings and ink drawings, permanent ink drawings, I would presume we're going to take those in with us. We had a little discussion about that yesterday. Maybe you could argue differently, but the one example of piercings we have is Jesus took his with him in his body. So you're going to have that into eternity. Consider that maybe God doesn't like tattoos, even though he didn't prohibit them under Paul. and then that you're going to be eternity with God, certainly He's going to be gracious. Certainly you're not going to lose your salvation based upon that. But I would consider, is this something that I could say, hey, God, look what I got, and stand before Him proudly. If I was going to get a tattoo, which I'm not because I'm an old man, among other reasons. But if I was going to get a tattoo, I think I would certainly make sure that it was going to honor God and that I could stand before God and say, this branded me as one of your followers, so that I could not get myself into a situation in which the testimony would not be there, and I'd have to fight against that testimony of who I am in Christ. So I would just consider all of those matters there. Okay, I am out of time, and I have a number of questions there. I'll save in the queue for tomorrow. But let me say two things before we go. One is that tonight I'll be teaching the book of John, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Tomorrow we'll have our regular schedule. Friday, in addition to Ask the Theologian, we do have our Taos Prophecy Conference that begins at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And you can go to taosfbc.org, then just click that top banner that'll be right there. September 25 through 27 with Drew and Roger. For some of you, this displays right there. If it doesn't display, then just click and it'll open up. There's the schedule. You can print that off right there. And you will see all that's going to happen. I think we're going to have a great conference Friday night, Saturday morning. Join us right here in Taos or online, wherever you are. I look forward to that. Tomorrow we'll get back with some good music. Today we'll close with elevator music. A blessing to be with you again today. As always, thanks for your biblical, theological, and worldview questions. I'll see you tonight, 6 p.m. If you can join us for that, maybe just a few minutes after 6 p.m. We'll be on. Sorry for the late start today with a little technical difficulty right at the beginning, but here we are. And with you, and it's been fun. Till next time, question the assumptions. We'll see you soon.